30% of the Chinese GDP is under lockdown. What is behind the sudden surge of the COVID-19 pandemic in China? And how is it connected to Xi Jinping's re-election as the Chinese president for the third time? A COVID bomb has exploded in China. On 24th November, the country reported above 31,000 COVID cases, the highest daily number since the pandemic began in China. Chongqing and Zhengzhou, the two major centers of electronics manufacturing in China, are under lockdown now. The capital city of Beijing is also wearing a deserted look. But how did it happen? How did China's much touted COVID prevention model fail? The answer to this question is China's zero COVID approach. Under this policy, China adopted a zero tolerance attitude towards the pandemic. Even a single corona case would trigger the authorities to impose sweeping restrictions in the area. This was highly effective in the beginning as it helped China keep its people unexposed to the coronavirus. But in the long run, this turned out to be its biggest mistake. People never gained the required immunity to COVID-19. That was partially because of poor vaccines and partially because of no existence of natural immunity. Compare China with India, a country with a similar demographic size. The pandemic ravaged India in the second wave, but it also helped India gain natural immunity. In China's case, such a ravaging COVID wave is still missing. Adding to that, its ineffective vaccines might also fail to help the Chinese government avert such catastrophe. The only way forward for China is to import highly effective vaccines from abroad, from US or India, and start a massive booster shot campaign if it really wants to steer out of this mess. But there is one more angle to the story, and this is slightly a controversial one. It is also a possibility that the Chinese government might be using COVID as a tool to suppress the civil uprising against Xi's re-election. We know people are angry with Xi's economic policies. Xi's crackdown on the tech sector has made the Chinese people jobless and hopeless and thus livid. Xi's re-election also caused a bloodbath in the Chinese stock markets, sending a clear message to CCP that the Chinese market and investors were not happy with Xi 3.0. So now, to tackle the rising dissent among the Chinese people, the CCP might be weaponizing COVID. For example, that is exactly what CCP did in the Zhengzhou I-phone factory. Workers were protesting, they were resorting to using violent means to have their demands met, and then to muzzle the protesters, COVID restrictions were put in place. But this approach is no longer working. People are fed up with COVID restrictions. Meanwhile, they are also realizing the fact that their leaders are good for nothing. So, iPhone factory protests might just be the tip of the iceberg. Large-scale public protests might be in the offing. The Chinese government may try to hide behind the pandemic to save its fortunes, but this can very well set the ball rolling for its collapse.
India's World, telling the right side of the story.